All right. Hello, everyone, again. Today, I'd like to introduce you to David Maller. And David is the founder of Ground Zero Recovery Coaching. David was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York, and succumbed quite early to the use of drugs, despite maintaining normalcy through school and work. David's career as a foreign currency broker was marred by the traumatic events of 9/11 while working at the World Trade Center. This led David to name his practice Ground Zero. It's the battle of substance abuse in his own family propelled David into the realm of substance abuse recovery coaching. So, welcome, David.
Right. Thank you for having me.
So, to help our audience understand how to break the stigma surrounding substance abuse, they need to know that it's still very prevalent. So, can you tell us what the percentage is of US workers out there who have a current substance abuse issue?
So currently, statistics show that 1 in 8 employees are suffering with some sort of substance use disorder, and with alcohol being on the top of the list. Also, when they say people suffering with a substance use disorder, 70% of the people having an issue are in our workforce, whether they're working full or part time. Most people think of that person with the use disorder as maybe the homeless on the street, the guy who looks like he needs a shower, but actually it's somebody right in our workforce, could be sitting right next to you at work.
Yeah, that's what we call those high functioning alcoholics or substance abuse of any kind. And I have a couple clients myself who still I'm trying to do work life balance with them as a husband and a father, and they still
Sure.
have to get out there and go out to those dinners and buy those drinks and schmooze until they close that deal. And so it's still very very prevalent. So, can you share with us what are some of the stigmas that are still associated with substance use disorder?
I think it begins with social stigma, the name calling.
Mm,
People, he's a drunk, he's a junkie, pothead, pillhead, etc. I think the name calling keeps people lurking in the shadows. I think the vocabulary needs to change. We, as a society, we need to stop calling people names. Everybody that's using, obviously, at some time, they're somebody's child.
yes.
They're a person. So why should we be labeling them these names that are just going to make them afraid to come forward? Like add that extra stigma where, oh, they just think so low of me. Who am I?
Right.
When we can drop the name calling, that would be a part of getting rid of the social
I think
stigma.
it's kind of like, with our socioeconomic scale and how we look at one another. Most of us are a paycheck or two away from being homeless ourselves, but we can be so quick to judge. And I think that's really important because that person who's using might have those thoughts and fears themselves, or like, hey, maybe I'm a car ride away or a bottle away or a pipe away from being that person that we look down on because they're not working. They may be on the street, right? Um,
It's so true. And just to talk about some of the other stigmas,
yeah,
we deal with systemic stigma.
yes,
So systemic stigma, I'll give you an example, is the way somebody gets treated who say has relapsed or overdosed 9 or 10 times, shows up in the emergency room, and how they're looked at or treated, compared to say the businessman who goes in and he gets treated one way, with some respect and how just with better care.
yeah.
And I have a story about that. I was volunteering as a recovery coach in an emergency room in a local hospital, and a guy came in and he had overdosed. I was told 9 or 10 times, and the doctor looked at him with disgust and said, "Why should I even help you?
Oh,
What's the use? And you're just going to be back here again." And I caught wind of this. And I was like, "Would I be able to speak to him for a couple of minutes?" And I basically got told, "Yeah, if you like, but it's probably not going to help."
mm.
So I spoke to this guy and I asked him. I said, "Do you like being spoken to that way?" And he goes, "No, I really don't." I said, "Do you like to be treated that way?" He's like, "No." I said, "Do you want help?" And I actually asked him if I could pray with him first, and he
Wow.
let me pray with him. And I said, you know, do you really want help? And he's like, I really do. So I was able to get on the phone with him and start making calls. And we called some secular and Christian recovery centers,
Okay.
anyone that would have a bed for him.
Sure.
And he actually thanked me so much. We actually got him a bed that night. And it was such a change in the way he was treated when he first walked in, you know, and that's the culture. That's just part of how people are treated once they have that stigma associated with them, drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, and again, it's like, okay, and then you're in the ER. That doctor's job is to treat him and get him back out the door. No one's there to discuss the resources. Where do I go? I know you and I spoke when we spoke earlier. We talked about the fact that I've come from California, and in California, pretty much every company has an EAP. But I know that
Huh.
is not, true. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But, I know that's not true for everyone, but there needs to be some kind of bridge that gets people the help they need. Again, whether it's from our churches and our community programs that can get them into that bed, or the insurance companies, which we know does not always have this. So, but you're right. The language, how we speak to one another, remembering that people have value always, and we don't know what's going on. We don't know whether that man tried. Maybe he'd been clean and sober for a while, and then something happened, and he went back to the old way of coping. It's not like we can change it overnight. It definitely takes a lot of time.
And there's also self stigma. You know, the self stigma is, you know, like that little voice in your head
Yeah,
where he's telling you, oh, I'm not good enough. Or, you know, people with mental health issues or substance use issues hardly ever get better. So I'm probably not going to get better either. And
right.
we start convincing ourselves of those things.
So then we keep band-aiding the problem instead of going deeper. Absolutely. Okay, so talking about resources, what can companies do? What can that top tier level, that CEO, that entrepreneur, owner of that company, what can he do to change the culture within his company with things like the events they have and the practices and maybe the dinners and drinks after, after work? And is there a way they could open that up and make it maybe more? I mean, I hear that Google's got this amazing thing where they've got donuts and soda machines, and maybe make that culture more on the inside where we can not have the alcohol events.
There's a few things. If you look at events, companies just need to do a better job. I
Yeah.
mean, as soon as you walk in, you're handed a cocktail, the bar is open, people start, you know, drinking more than they should. Um, you know, why not offer a mocktail station? Why not have a non-alcoholic bar?
Yeah.
You know, who wants to walk around the party with a bottle of water in their hand or a Diet Coke
Right.
and they feel like they're just not part of the festivities?
Right.
Offer different options, you know. And I'll tell you the truth, I've been that guy at company parties years ago thinking I'm going to go and I'm going to have one cocktail. And all of a sudden I find myself three or four in. And it's never a good place to be.
Right.
You know, you could be saying something to male or female colleague. You know, once you say it, you cannot take it back. You said it already.
That's
And
right.
people get themselves in trouble in these parties.
Yes.
And, you know, some of the big corporations out there are actually doing first hour no alcohol. So if they're going to have a presentation, they'll do their presentation at the first hour. So people don't feel funny, or I'm not having a drink. And if they choose to leave, they can just leave after that. They
Yes.
came for the festivity. They heard the company's presentation. And when
Yes.
the bar opened up and it wasn't for them, they had an easy exit,
Ah,
you
that's
know.
a great idea. I really like
Yeah.
that one a lot. That's super
Yeah.
great.
And
Having a
also,
dinner if that, I mean, I just went to an event. It was a fundraiser event, and they spoke. Now they did. This is a it was a Christian based event, so there was no alcohol, but they served water and tea and things like that. And maybe that would even something like that. If you're going to have a formal dinner, maybe you don't serve any alcohol until after, right? To where you're serving water, juices, tea, lemonade with dinner. Now people at least got something in their stomach as well, do that presentation, and then you're right, people can then go home, people can stay. It'd be great if they
part of
collect
the
everybody's
part of the
keys and
problem
have
is
Ubers waiting. But
exactly, but part of the problem it's used as a reward. You come
yes,
into these events and there's like a champagne tower because we had a great quarter, or they're wheeling around the bar cart because we had a great 6 months. That's where the culture has to change. Don't make it that's the reward that
Right.
somebody's going to slosh. You know, there's so many implications to it. What about that guy drives home and hurts somebody on the way? Or
Yeah.
like you mentioned, Uber.
Yeah.
Many companies they'll supply a black car, an Uber, to
Yeah.
the way home. But
Right.
who knows where that guy's getting dropped off? He could be going to the train station or the bus stop and still have to drive home from there.
Right.
And things can happen. He can kill himself or somebody else.
That's a really good point. I mean, I've worked with a lot of men who come into therapy after going through recovery because they got that DUI at someone's retirement party, or
True.
their own retirement party. This is not just a young men's issue, right? Yeah, our
100%.
age group
Yeah.
can definitely get caught up in this, and we've been doing it forever. Our parents is what they did.
Right.
So on that same note, these are the people that are not in denial that may be looking at this like you did at some point in your life and go, yeah, you know what? This is not okay. I don't remember the last half of that party. What does the employee or the executive who are suffering with a substance abuse, disorder, how do they come forward? How do they, we're talking about resources, whether there's an EAP or an HR company, how do they do that?
Yeah, I think that when they can get past the stigma,
Yeah.
they need to go straight to HR. Because what happens is people wait. They have their alcohol or drug or drinking problem. They don't tell anybody, right? So now they start missing days at work, or they start showing up and they're not working correctly. And a lot of people get fired for not coming forward because nobody knows that they're actually having a problem,
Right.
and they get fired for all the dumb things they do along the way. When if they could have just presented themselves to HR quietly and said, I have an issue going on, and HRs and the management, and if your company has an EAP, they have to keep your confidentiality. And in most places, you cannot get fired for that reason. You get fired for all the other dumb things, and they have an obligation to get you help. You
Okay.
know,
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know. Like I said, I've heard other places don't have EAPs, but I know that from what I've heard just doing my interviews is that HR is definitely there for the company. However, everything has to be documented. And yeah,
correct.
when you can come forward and say that I've got this problem versus getting fired for the way it manifested because you can't explain it, then you have some recourse. So on
You
that
know,
note, so what are some of the sources available to employees? How do they, okay, so back on that question, HR it's not really employee friendly in the minds of many employees. So how do they do that and remain safe and then remain in the confidential position?
I think what happens is once the person comes forward, and they can get past the fear of looking down upon or being fired. See, HR then takes a different look at this. They don't want to have a company lawsuit. If somebody just comes forward and tells them that there's an issue and it's documented,
Hmm.
now if they would have let that person go at that point, you know, there's lawsuits can be had at those times.
Okay.
Because you've come forward, you let them know there's an issue. Now
Okay.
they have to deal with the issue. Another thing that companies could do better, and we didn't touch on this, is better educating management and the workforce. I'll give you my Wall Street example is they train us on everything. I've been trained on money laundering 4 times this year. I've been trained on sexual harassment. Don't tell the woman at the coffee machine her hair looks good today. You can't say anything, right? But they don't train us at all about, substance use, the dangers, what to look for. You know, what about if your coworker comes into work every day, he's nodding at the desk? What about if he's got red blazing eyes every day and you notice it and the guy's not coming forward? What are you supposed to do as his coworker? Do you bury your head in the sand and not say anything? Do you
Hmm.
tap him on the shoulder and say, "Hey, is something going on? Can I help
Hmm.
you with anything?"
Hmm.
Try to be his confidant, his friend.
Yeah.
You know, you can't bury your head in the sand because people die that way.
Yeah. Well, that leads to my next question. So, in your experience, you started doing this work as a recovery coach. How can a peer, you're that peer, and you see these signs and you know there's something going on? You don't, do I pry? Do I ignore it? Is it not my problem? Is he my friend? You know, what um what is it that they can look for and see, and then what can they do? What can they do to help that coworker that might even be in denial to get the help that they need?
I think you have to look past, I'm his buddy and I'm not going to say anything,
Okay.
because I think that's only how people end up dying.
Yeah.
I think you, like I said, you need to have a private conversation with them. Hey, is something going on you want to tell me about? And if he may get obstinate with you or angry that you brought this up,
Right.
or oh, I'm not doing. Oh, I prescribed the medication. I have an issue,
Okay.
like with that, and have all these excuses. But if it's constantly happening, I think you have an obligation to tell your immediate manager,
Okay.
hey, I think something's up. Why don't you have a conversation with them?
Right.
Because these things save lives.
Yes.
You're
And
not
they
doing anybody a favor by not bringing up and, like I said before, burying it in the sand.
right. Have you had an experience where you saw this actually work?
I've actually seen both sides of it.
Okay.
I've seen it. I've seen it work where I've seen a guy get sent away to treatment
Okay.
and came back maybe 45 days later and was not doing any drugs or alcohol,
Okay.
and he became like the best employee on my desk.
Oh,
His work was above and beyond. And statistics show that it's cheaper and more efficient for a company to get a worker help than it is to fire them and try to start retraining somebody else, or maybe stealing a worker from another company where you pay twice as much as you really need to. And the guys you get help, they become your most loyal employee.
wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's
And then
awesome.
I saw the other side of it. One of my competitors having issues, drinking and drugging. Um, he was my competitor for like 25 years, but
Mm,
kept burying his head in the sand. He was one of those guys that could do very well at the job the next day after using or drinking, and nobody said anything to him. Management didn't care. As long as he brought in a lot of money, they just didn't care.
yeah.
And one morning he was found in the street, and somebody thought he was homeless. It was after a company party, and he was dead in the street. He never made it home. He died that night from an overdose, and people were passing by him as if he was like a street derelict or something, when he was one of their coworkers. And people
Oh,
told me that they passed by him and didn't even know it was him on the floor.
oh, that's so sad. Wow.
Mm.
Wow, fantastic work you are doing. My goodness. So, all right. So, that's kind of all the questions that I have. I think that kind of covers what people can do. And obviously, people can reach out to you, David. But can you share with us a little bit your journey, your Wall Street journey, as well as I know you have a journey with your own daughter? Just share that with everybody.
Let me try to make it the brief version. So, um, became a father young, working on Wall Street as a young guy, and my ex-wife developed a drinking issue. And I was just like a codependent. I was running to the liquor store, buying the bottles of liquor just to keep the peace in the house. Didn't want the neighbors to hear us fighting, but everybody heard us fighting. And on the outside, we looked like the perfect family. Uh, my kids are always well dressed. First kids on the school bus, and it just wasn't a good place. And I'm just going fast forward. My daughter's in her teen. Now, all along, I think I'm just a codependent, but I'm a guy who was smoking weed every day, thinking I didn't have an issue, but I did. And so my daughter gets in trouble in high school for smoking weed, and my mom goes to punish her. My daughter goes right in the garage, goes into one of my old golf bags, pulls out a big bag of weed and says, "How are you punishing me? This is my father's."
Oh,
And so I was crushed that day, and that was actually the last day I ever smoked. Uh, the drugs and stuff that I had done on Wall Street, staying up at late at night and partying, had already been over with for years for me. It wasn't an issue I was dealing with it anymore. And things were okay at home, and all of a sudden my daughter developed a harder drug issue. We moved out of Brooklyn. We lived in a quiet suburb of New Jersey, thinking that was a great place to raise her. And Kids were going to house parties, raiding medicine cabinets, mom's pills, grandma's pills, and it got bad. My daughter ended up being in and out of rehab treatment centers for the next 5 or 7 years,
Mm.
and maybe 20 rehabs. But then she got clean. One of the centers really cared about her. They didn't care about insurance. Money didn't care about anything. She could stay until she got clean. She got clean. They put her to school to work in the industry. She worked as a behavioral health tech at a women's facility.
Mm.
And during this time, I got asked to run a Christian 12-step program. And I went to some training for it. And I was like, this isn't for me. And I called my daughter, and she's like, Dad, you got to stay. Somebody like me is going to walk in the door. Someone like my mom is going to come in the door. You've been through every wall with us. You got to be there. And I stayed. And my friend who was running the program used to tease me and go, oh, you're going to run this one day. And I was like, Frank, I am just here to help you. That's not my thing. Well, Frank left. A woman took over. She left. COVID hit. And I found myself either keeping it running or letting it close. And we were just helping too many people.
Yeah.
And during that time, I decided to go to school to become a recovery coach, not knowing what I was going to do with it. Just wanted to have that under my belt. Maybe I could help somebody like my daughter with the issues she was going through. So just around the time COVID hit, my daughter was clean 7 years. And she told me, Daddy, I used, and I went out and used a couple of times.
Mm.
And she was living in my Jersey condo, and I was only there on weekends. And I said, you have to go to treatment. And she went away to treatment, 30 days, and she went to go live in a woman's facility. Now COVID hits, and they don't know what to do. Like the world didn't know what to do. And they said, we need people to quarantine. And I was scared.
Yeah.
And I called the management there, and I said, I'm afraid about this. They well, Dana runs every one of our groups. She doesn't miss a meeting. She's our biggest facilitator here. She can go home. And Dana didn't make it home. Dana went out and used and didn't use like a great amount of drugs or anything, but the drugs she did take had fentanyl in it, and she died that night before making it home.
Is this your daughter?
This is my daughter.
Oh, David, I am so sorry.
So I lost my daughter Palm Sunday of 2020.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's crushing. I don't know how I get over it. I don't really get over it. They say time heals all wounds. It doesn't. I have strong faith, and that's why I'm able to move forward. But becoming a coach and a substance use facilitator, I go into the workplace and I give trainings is not just a second job for me. This is a passion for me. If I can help one like my daughter, I've succeeded.
Wow.
And that's all I'm at. And
Well, this really hits home. And I know, the whole fentanyl discussion in our country is huge right now. And we just can't play. We can't experiment. We have to find healthy coping skills to deal with our life. And I absolutely believe that God has led you here. And I am so sorry for your loss. And you
not
know,
a,
though,
right.
there's someone else's son or daughter, just like she said, that you're going to help out there. And I
Yeah.
think this is really, really, really important because I have this in my practice every day and have for the last 24 years. So, how do people find you, David?
So I'm easy to find. GroundZeroRecoveryCoaching.com.
Okay.
You can find my website very easily. If you sign up with your email on my website, I usually run one free group coaching session a month. I get a group together and email everybody ahead of time and invite, and they can come to a free coaching session to see what coaching's about. But back to the fentanyl, anybody using a street drug today is playing Russian roulette.
Yes.
Um, you don't know what's in those pills, drugs, even sprinkled on marijuana today that's not bought in a dispensary. And people are dying. I give a statistics in one of my substance awareness presentations that 100,000 people died of an overdose in 2023 in the USA.
Yep.
70,000 of them were fentanyl related. So picture giant stadium, um, filled with people. That's how many people, 70,000 people.
Wow. That's incredible. Oh my goodness. Well, David, thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story with us. And I know that you're going to be helping a whole lot of people. So if there's anybody in our audience and you're not even that there and you know someone not in this summit, please share David's information because it could definitely save a life.
And I don't only coach in New York, I coach many guys on Zoom. Um, so you don't have to think you have to be in the New York City area for me to.
Absolutely. Thank goodness for Zoom. That was one of the blessings of COVID. All right,
But yeah,
David, thank you very much.
thank you. Have a great night.